Okay, numbers continue to grow, so we're going to crack on and get things done here. So a very good afternoon to you all, ladies and gentlemen. My name, as it says on the screen, is Tudor Price. I look after the Kent and Medway Growth Hub. I'm also the Deputy Chief Exec at the Kent and Victor Chamber of Commerce, who deliver the Kent and Medway Growth Hub. So we'll be able to provide you with a bit of insight on some of the funding, advice and guidance out there. Before we move into the introductions and the administration, I think it's probably worth just acknowledging the recent breaking news about the passing of the Duke of Edinburgh. For those of you that hadn't heard, unfortunately, he passed away peacefully at home with Her Majesty the Queen. And obviously our thoughts go out to Her Majesty and the family as they deal with this sad news. I think that's all I will say on the matter, but I just wanted to make sure that that moment hadn't passed without us at least acknowledging it. So thank you very much for your indulgence there. Right, so for the next hour, we have a huge amount to get through. Very significant roadmap date has arrived, and therefore there are lots of questions, and we will endeavour to do our best to try and answer them. We have, as ever, through the grateful efforts of Kay and her team, managed to assemble a panel of expertise who will do their best to answer your questions, of which many have been submitted in advance. We will try and make sure we get round to those as we go through. You will find that your microphones have been muted. That's really because the background noise would be too much. If for whatever reason we struggle to try and articulate your question correctly, or understand what it is you're asking of us in the live chat, I will invite you to come off mute, or I'll speak to our tech support, who will unmute you and allow you to actually sort of ask the question in person. You're more than welcome to keep your cameras on, of course. It's always helpful to see who we're talking to, unless, of course, you're tucking into lunch. So you will see in the live chat a number of links have already been posted, and they are there for your assistance, and we will continue to post relevant links and information for you to be able to access post-event. This event is being recorded, and you will have access to this recording and the questions and answer sessions. It takes a little bit of time to get them out because we need to put subtitles onto them, but they'll be posted and you'll be emailed as to when they are made available. The topic for today is very focused on the 12th of April. There is, of course, another roadmap date of the 17th of May, which we heard today may be brought forward, but let's not get too excited there. So a lot of the questions and answers relate to the 12th of April guidance. Not because we're being difficult, but to be honest with you, as you will have learnt by now, guidance and regulations are published very sparsely and normally at the last minute, which means we don't really have much information on the 17th of May deadline yet at all, which also reminds me just to preemptively manage expectations by saying our experts here know as much as they know, but quite often some of the answers to your questions haven't even been published yet. So we will, as always, endeavour to do our best to make sure that we have answered your question, but there will be occasions where we'll say, we think, but we're not sure. That's no fault of anybody here. Unfortunately, the legislation moves so rapidly these days. It's really hard for the administration to sort of try and keep up. But we'll do our best, and if anything, we'll at least leave you with some guiding principles and some reassurance. Okay, that's enough babble from me. We're going to crack on now. The first bit of business really is to introduce you to our expert panel. They always tremble when I say expert because it makes them feel like they're on the spot. But I'm going to go first to Tracy, who will introduce herself and what she does. Tracy, over to you.
Thank you, Tudor. I'm Tracy Beattie. I am the Mid-Kent Environmental Health Manager, and this is it covers Swale, Maidstone and Tunbridge Wells District Council areas. Thank you. Fantastic,
Tracy. Jim, good morning. Or good afternoon, sorry.
Good afternoon, Tudor. Thank you. Yes, my name's Jim Woodett. I'm here today representing the COVID enforcement cell for KCC. Thank you.
Jim, thank you very much indeed. You wear several hats, I know, so you're not quite sure which one you're wearing today, but you know why you're here. Definitely got to do with enforcement. So the guy to keep on side. Nathan, good afternoon.
Hello, Tudor. Hello, everybody. My name's Nathan Martin. I'm the Principal Trading Standards Officer for Kent County Council Trading Standards, working in the Business Advice Services team. So my day-to-day job is to work with businesses, help you get things right. I'll be answering questions today on the reopening side of things.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. And finally, Steve. Steve, good afternoon to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Steve Andrews from South East Water. I'm head of central operations at South East Water, so I look after water supplies across Kent and Sussex.
Steve, thank you very much indeed. Now, there is a lot to get through. There will be questions and follow-up questions which you may have, which you won't be able to ask or get answered here. You will see in the live chat a telephone number, 03333 602 300. That is a free helpline that will take you through to the Growth Hub, and you can book a call back from Nathan or one of his team at Trading Standards, or we can pass you through to one of our other expertise from the panel here today to do a follow-up call and hopefully answer in more detail the questions which you have. So if you want to make a note of that number, and if you feel you have further questions or need further clarification, please do use that phone number, and the team will do their best to hook you up with the right expertise. Okay, so as ever, I will be scanning down the attendee list, which is huge, but I'll be trying to make sure that the questions that have been submitted by attendees here today get asked. I will do my best to get through what we can in an hour. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Steve first to just share with us some top tips and some do's and don'ts around reopening and your water supply, something which you may not ordinarily have thought of. So Steve, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Tudor. Yeah, just a few things. Hopefully everyone will have a water supply in their premises, and clearly if you haven't been using those buildings for some time, just some advice on just flushing that pipe work through so that the water can get stagnant if it's not been turned over. So just flush those taps for a good 10 minutes. If you've got cold water storage tanks, try and drain down those cold water storage tanks and refill them. Potentially you can have leaks on them, or the water in it can get stagnant, so do check on that. If you're a business that in the leisure industry that may have Legionella risk, we just advise you to check your Legionella risk assessment and follow the guidance on that. And just a last one from me, if you do have a plumbed-in cold water dispenser in one of your buildings, an office building or something like that, please remember they also need draining through before people are going to use them. So really just a good flush through of all the water systems. Sniff test always works. So if it's smelling nice and chlorine-y, then it's been fully flushed. If it's still smelling a bit musty, flush it through for a bit longer. If you're still getting any taste and odour problems, give us a call and we'll arrange for one of our field teams to come out and do a visit. Okay.
Yeah, that's great, Steve. So yeah, the field team can come out and do a visit. Is there a charge for that, or is that?
No, we wouldn't charge if you've got a query on the water quality. We'd arrange for one of our inspectors to come out. If we do need to take some samples because there's a problem, there may be a charge for that, but the visit would be free.
Superb. That's really good to know. Thank you, Steve. And if you have any questions, because some of you wouldn't be aware that Steve was going to be with us today, so if you have any specific questions for Steve, please do pop them in the chat, and we'll make sure we ask him as we go through. Steve, thank you very much, Steve, for those opening comments. Right, we're going to crack on with the questions we've been submitted here. So if our panel could get ready for their start of 10. We're going to go straight in with a question from Revitalised Beauty Salon here, based at Westgate. So Nathan, got your name against this. Beauty salons reopening date. Have the beauty industry's COVID guidelines changed? And are any beauty treatments restricted upon reopening? A matter of great importance to me. Nathan.
Okay, so reopening date, as you probably suspect, is 12th of April. So it has been confirmed you can reopen from then. With regards to industry guidelines, I'm not aware of what the sort of industry specific stuff, the stuff that's coming out of independent bodies, that sort of is saying, but the government guidance is remaining largely the same, although they have made it very, very clear that the wearing of face masks is mandatory for clients and staff in this one, and they are recommending both a face visor and a face mask for people doing the beauty treatments. With regards to are any beauty treatments restricted, it's not covered in the legislation or in the guidance, and as such, as they haven't said you can't do X, Y, or Z, then we have to assume that those treatments are allowed.
That's great. Really encouraging news. Great to hear. Thank you very much indeed. Jim, I'm going to come to you next. This is a question from Caseware UK. They're a fintech business that are based in Maidstone, and the question they asked is, will there be a recommended number of staff per square metre? And also, what is the legislation around staff who refuse to wear masks, get vaccinated because of personal beliefs, and also who do not follow social distancing rules? So I guess it's very much an enforcement, but also an HR and personnel issue here as well. So Jim, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yes, thank you, Tudor. As you've alluded to, first off, this would obviously be something around the business and their own processes and HR requirements, and how they're managing their operation locally. The issue around number of people per square metre, there isn't anything in legislation around that, but obviously the standard message at the moment is hands, face, space, 2 metre social distancing. And then if we were looking around legislation around wearing of a face mask, if you are required to wear a face mask for that activity, then you should. And if you don't, then that is enforceable by the police or the British Rail Police. But I'm guessing in this case, it's going to be in a retail type of setting or a business setting. So that,
yeah, so they're a fintech, so it's going to be an office environment, I guess.
Yeah, office environment. So in that case, then masks should be worn depending on your spacing and distancing. I know within large organisations, lots of people are saying it's mandatory to wear them. But if it is a requirement by law, then you should. And if you don't, then it's a police issue. The vaccine, you can't force anybody to have a vaccine. It's obviously a recommendation for everybody to. So that is something that wouldn't be able to be dealt with. And social distancing, again, if that's social distancing rules, that could be a health and safety executive issue if you've got people who are persistently not, and it could also then be against your internal policy as well. So it could be a police issue for the face mask, it could be health and safety at work if people aren't following social distancing. Hope that answers the question.
I think it does. Interestingly, clearly, there's we touched on this, and I'm just thinking actually on the Kent Invicta Chamber of Commerce website, some of the past webinars that were done. One was done with Bracious around employment law on this particular point around what employers can do for in terms of sort of policy and implementing policy. Now, you can make changes, insist on policy, and therefore, that sort of forces your staff to comply. The question I just come back to you with, Jim, on the if an employee rang you up from this office firm saying, look, no one else is wearing masks in here, what would be your approach? How would you sort of come to the employer? It
would, depending on which enforcement authority it was who would be dealing with it, it would be referred to them, and then they would be taking it forwards. Is if it is a company policy and if it is a legal requirement they should be wearing it, then it could be enforced. But if it is an individual person who is failing to do that, so it depends if it's the member of staff complaining against the business not doing it, or the business saying I've got people who aren't, then it would, like I say, it would be a police issue if there is a legal requirement at that point within that situation for that person to wear it and they're not. And then it would be referred to the police. And as most people are probably aware, there's the 4 steps around engage, encourage, explain, and then enforcement. So any enforcement agency within Kent would look to engage with the people to understand why are people exempt. If they're not exempt, then it would be a case of trying to get people to comply and then enforce if needed.
That's really useful to know. And I think there's a bit of a note there from Antoinette about exemptions, of course. Yeah, I think that the key here we've taken away at the Chamber with the conversations with HR experts, communication is the key. Communication, really, finding out why, if someone has a particular reason, obviously there might be some legitimate exemptions and exceptions, but communicate. I think the worst thing in the world these days is to sort of take a generic view and not to sort of attend to anyone's needs. It will avoid people like Jim having to get involved, and then obviously the police, and ultimately that's what we're looking to do. So talk to your staff rather than go for it. Hopefully we answered your question there. Okay, Tracy, putting you on standby here. So I'm going to bring to you a question from the White Horse Public House in Sittingbourne. Can customers pay by card in the pub if Wi-Fi won't work in the garden? Now, obviously this is to do with beer gardens not being allowed inside and so forth. So what's your advice on that?
the pesky mute button. Thanks, Tudor. Yes, it's been a topic of conversation within environmental health, and the government did come out with some guidance yesterday. You know, we talk about lastminute.com, and it's true to form, they have come out with it. What they're saying is that if you can pay inside, then that's obviously preferable. But if you can't, and that could be down to the infrastructure, then the public or customers can go inside to pay, but they should be wearing a mask when they're in, and preferably one person at a time, or one payee at a time. But as you know, sort of even though hospitality is resuming outside, customers still can go in to use the toilet facilities as well, and the same principles would apply.
Same principles. So again, I guess that going back to, like we've said in the past, so the guiding principles of not getting people to gather and congregate and to be within close proximity. So yeah, practicalities would suggest you've got to come in to pay, but don't loiter at the bar, don't have a pint, you know, back out to the garden. Well,
encourage customers to have a tab and pay once rather than constantly sort of going in and out. And there are sort of, you know, other sort of things I'm sure that you could do as a business which would make it compliant.
Absolutely.
It's about limiting exposure, really.
Yeah, no, that's really a good idea. I like that. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so I'm just going to come across to Steve, actually, because you're just talking about pubs there. And you know, I'm thinking pubs, pipes, flushing and stuff like that. I would imagine there are fairly good protocols in place on it, but is there any guidance or suggestions you've got in relation to that type of environment?
No, the same sort of principles apply. It's just flushing through all of that pipe work. Clearly, pubs are likely to have some storage tanks. So if you have got cold water storage tanks, do drain them down fully and then allow them to refill. You're looking for that sort of bit of chlorine smell in the water. That means you flushed everything through. So yeah, that same sort of advice applies.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much indeed, Steve. So it's going to come back to Nathan here. So this is a question from my rural activity centre. Sector guidance for dog training has suggested clients should wear masks. This is for clients when outside and obviously over 2 meters apart. Is this really necessary? This will impede communication when 2 meters plus apart and outside. So sector guidance, so I guess industry sector, trade body, are saying wearing a mask, but if you're 2 meters apart, is it necessary? So first of all, advice, and I guess there might be a bit of compliance question here as well, Jim, but Nathan, over to you first.
The question came in, I did try to find the specific guidance, but I couldn't find it. What I would say is, like I said, there isn't any government guidance that I've seen that says this. But if it's trade sector specific guidance, if your specific sector have looked at it and decided that we think you need to do this in order to keep people safe in your premises, then I would do as they are following. But with all things, when it comes down to guidance, if there's no legal requirement for you to actually wear it, and I'm not aware of the legal requirement to be wearing a face mask outside, social distance, etc., that sort of thing, and ultimately it will come down to your own risk assessment, what you've identified as being necessary to keep people safe, and the steps if you've identified that something is necessary, then you have to do it. And I would say a big part of your risk assessment is what your trade body is telling you. So again, I think it boils back to it. They've obviously put time and effort into this, and if they think it's required, I would recommend that you do it. I would, of course, invite comments from Jim on this one.
Go on, Jim. What do you think? Are you going to rock up and think you've breached the guidance from your sector or trade body? You know, we're going to come after you.
I was actually going to go a completely different route on this one, to be completely honest with you, Tudor.
Yeah, it's fine. Go for it.
And basically, I was looking more at the point around gathering, because obviously depending on what you're doing outside and how many people can actually meet. And I'm just very, very quickly looking at what people are permitted to do in gatherings outdoors. And I know from all the work that I've done on this recently, there is no specific exemption around dog training. I know that for a fact. So then looking at the basic points as to why you can gather it's around consisting of more than 6 people and takes place outdoors. And that is if it is in a general sort of public space. There are different exemptions if you're doing things for specific reasons, and if it is on business premises. So there are differences that apply. So it really does depend on where this is happening. And I mean, that is the specific issue at the moment, because I can't see that you would be allowed to gather for more than 6. There are different exemptions, but I can't see how that fits into this one at the moment. So I probably need to do a little bit more research on that one.
Yeah, that's
Just
fine.
to try and top and tail that, if that's okay.
Of course, Jim, no problem at all. And if you are here, Rural Activity Centre, you're more than welcome just to sort of clarify that question in the live chat, and we'll see if we can try and get back to you a bit more. So, okay, thank you very much indeed.
Sorry,
Yep.
if it is at their centre and that is a business in its own right, then it can be deemed a permitted gathering under Regulation 5, in which case there could be reasons why they could have more than 6 people at that point if it is a business premises. So it would depend on where it is, and that's the critical point that I would like to come back to. So if they can provide a bit more information, we can give a better answer.
That's great. Superb. Hopefully they're with us here as well. Okay. Let's go to another one who I know is with us here today, which was, I'm just trying to find it. There they are, the Old Kent Barn wedding venue. Lovely place. Been there myself many moons ago. Question, this is for you again, Jim. It's a last question. So when would a venue like ours be permitted to open for COVID secure viewings for couples and couples meetings following all precautions and guidelines? Is this in line with non-essential retail? Are these meetings classed as business meetings? So again, nice and sort of involved there. What do you reckon?
Okay, so looking at this one, the first point of calling is the business itself currently still restricted under the regulations? And from what I understand, hotels, those sorts of accommodation places are still restricted, but I believe the Old Kent Barn might not be. It might just be a facility and not have beds and that for people to stay. So in that case, it could be that they are permitted. You'd then have to look and make sure that they wouldn't fall under the definition of a conference centre or a trade show. So therefore, if it's none of those and it's not a restricted business, then as I've just outlined, because it's a business, you could then deem it to be a permitted gathering. And in which case you can have people attend, so in a household bubble. So I think in the question it talks of a couple attending to view. So therefore, from what I can see at the moment, I would say that would be the case if they are not a restricted business under the new regulations. Superb.
Jim, thank you very much. And Old Kent Barn, you are obviously here. I've seen you on the attendees list. If you want more information, again, you can put a phone call through 03333 602 300, and we can do some more in-depth conversation with you. Tracy, I'm going to come to you next. There was a question here. There we go. It was for the East Malling Centre. East Malling Centre, surprisingly in East Malling. We are a charity community centre. Prior to the reopening in September, we carried out a deep clean. Do we need to do the same again?
I think, Tudor, that it's always wise to undertake a thorough clean, but I think that you ought to focus on hand contact surfaces, so door handles, taps. There's no need to undertake fogging. I know that certain businesses have been promoting this as necessary, but it isn't. And there are other extreme sort of cleaning regimes you don't need to follow. So it's that sensible cleaning of the main hand contact points and just the sort of preparation that you would do if you were opening your premises up anyway. I would advise you to sort of review your risk assessment and look at how you implement cleaning between users. So I'm not quite familiar with the East Malling Centre, but if it's anything like my community centre, if you have regular users that would be going in later in the opening, then sort of you would need to sort of undertake sort of or assess how you are going to clean between those users. And of course you will need your QR code and an alternative logbook for those who haven't got smartphones. And then I would sort of refer back to what Steve said about opening up in terms of water. Look at your Legionella risk assessment for that.
Interesting. You're quite right. We touched upon the point that there are some very astute individuals who've seen the opportunity of saying, oh, you really need to be having a deep clean, and by sheer coincidence, we offer that service for a small commercial fee of X £1,000. Yeah, don't be duped. It's rather like the old sort of fire extinguishers, the bogus fire safety officers used to come around and saying, oh, you have to have all of this and all of that. It'll cost you £1,000. Here's a contract. Again, everyone, the panel is here, all these departments are here to provide you with that correct advice. If you have a situation like that where you're being told you have to do something and there's a price tag and a contract, pick up the phone 0333 602 300 and ask the question, and we'll make sure that you're not being scammed or unnecessarily taking action which doesn't have to be done. But some good advice. Thank you, Tracy. Okay. So I'm going to just batch a couple of questions together here. So Jim, this is Blue Town Remembered and Arden Theatre. We've batched these two because they're possibly very similar. So question from them both here. What do we have to have in place to reopen a theatre? And the other question, which is from Arden Theatre in Faversham, again, note well, we are a small 98-seater theatre. Social distancing of any kind remains a real hindrance and naturally inhibits any form of live production. When might we be able to open our doors as if it was April 2019? Bless, gosh, let's cast your mind back that far. Theatre opening rules, what have you got?
Okay, I'm going to ask people to go and have a look at the Events Industry Forum. There is a document that's been put together on that web page. If you sign up to it, then what they do is when it amends and changes with the legislation, they will email you a new version of the guidance, and that goes through some of those specific points for the events industry. So I would suggest that people maybe go and have a look at that as a starting point to see when are they going to be open up, as it was back in, sorry, did you say 2019?
Well, April 2019, back in the halcyon days when we could all sort of hug and kiss and
when we could all do stuff. That's all dependent on the roadmap and all of the other requirements of that. So I can't really comment on that, but I would suggest that people look at the Events Industry Forum as a starting point. They should hopefully get some guidance from that. And if they do have trade bodies explaining to them how they should, then I know in previous restrictions there was looking at how people could be seated and accommodated, but I haven't got anything to hand on that at the moment, so I wouldn't want to give people false hope. Keep checking, and hopefully when it becomes more applicable, I would hope the government would provide us with guidance that we would then share at the appropriate time.
I think you make a good point there. Thank you, Jim. Some sector bodies, trade bodies are really hot and on the topic here, so, and they go pick out the relevant information for your sector. Others not so much. So it's difficult to sometimes know where to signpost people. But clearly, I know the Events Industry Forum has been a very good one, as is one of the wedding industry ones as well. They're pretty good. And I think the challenge really with theatres, of course, is there's a commercial aspect to this, the viability of it all. You need a certain number of bums on seats, or we need a certain number of covers in the restaurant to make it sort of financially viable. And again, the challenge is, actually, is it financially viable to open in a socially distanced manner? And we know through the Chamber and through the Growth Hub, having spoken to several businesses that involved in events and that stuff, have chosen not to open until they're allowed to sort of put in a sufficient number of sufficient number of seats or covers to make it actually sort of financially pay. So there's a commercial decision there as well to sort of take into account.
Yeah,
Jim,
and if I could just also say that currently they theatres, except drive-in theatres, and I must admit I've not seen a drive-in theatre, but currently theatres are still on the restricted list. So until that changes, which wouldn't be before, at the earliest point, possibly the 17th of May, they appear not to be permitted to go ahead at the moment, unless of course it's a drive-in, in which case they'd probably have to talk to their local safety advisory group as to how they could move forward safely to put on a performance. So hopefully that gives people just a little bit more information.
Okay. Question here just on enforcement in from Antoinette. Have you ever heard of an organisation called Mark 1 COVID Enforcers? Are they under the KCC enforcement? Question. Are Mark 1 COVID Enforcers? Have you heard of them?
I haven't, no, but we can take that. Could we just have a little bit more information around that, possibly in the chat, so that we know In what
So,
context?
yeah,
Is it a specific area? Because it could be.
I don't know.
Could be that a
Antoinette,
district.
if our tech could maybe allow Antoinette to unmute, if that's possible, or whether that's not possible, I don't know.
It might be a company that's being used in a specific district.
Thank
to
you.
do COVID.
Yes, Antoinette. Hi. Sorry. Go
Hi,
ahead.
Jim.
Ask your
Sorry to
question.
keep bothering you. You can get me
That's
back
why
at
you're
some
here.
point. No, but Jim knows me, which makes it worse.
I see. Okay.
Mark 1 are pounding the streets in Thanet. Mark 1 security. And they've got COVID wardens on their back. And the reason I asked actually is I just wondered about kind of dress code requirements, expectations, whether they're part of your team. And also when I was out with the kids the other day, one of them had quite a scary kind of Halloween type mask. And it's like, oh, do you know what? Actually, this isn't quite right. And I just wondered kind of where they fall in terms of COVID enforcement.
Okay, I can see that Tracy's just put a hand up, but they might well be somebody that the local council are using. I can feed back to Thanet District Council about that and find out what's going on. But Tracy, did you want to come in?
Yeah, please do, Tracy. Jump in there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think they are employed by Thanet District Council to support the enforcement work and make sure that people are compliant. And I would advise you to just pop them a message to say that you feel that it wasn't quite right, it wasn't hitting the right tone. I think they would appreciate that. And obviously we will provide some feedback to Thanet about it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Antoinette. I'm glad you raised that. Again, I guess going back to that sort of being slightly cautious of different individuals purporting to be sort of official bodies or some kind. We know that the Reopening High Streets Fund has been used to engage resources and providers to help with some of the COVID secure and COVID marshals and stuff like that. But they are being paid for by public funds and therefore should be accountable and have certain minimum standards that you as a member of the public or business should expect. So if you're struggling to get in touch with the right people at Thanet, again, drop us a line on the phone number and we'll see if we can put you in touch, Antoinette. Thank you for clarifying that question.
I can feed it back through the can feed it back through the enforcement cell. That's not a problem. Thank you.
Jim, thank you very much. Brilliant. Okay. Valerie, you've put a question here in the chat. I'm going to go to you because you asked the question. So with regard to marquees, what constitutes the 50% that has to be open to constitute outside? What constitute? Okay. If a marquee is against the back wall of a building, does this count as part of the 50% closed, please? Who wants to take that?
I have dusted off my old smoke-free legislation guidance, which this is based on. So the government are actually using the criteria that they implemented for the smoke-free legislation. And a back wall of a building would constitute part of the structure of an outside shelter. So the shelter has to have less than 50% of the wall space to be an outside or a compliant structure. I think the thing is that sort of if you are in any doubt, just give your district council a quick ring and ask for advice on it, and perhaps take a photograph or send them a video. I mean, I know that's what some businesses have done in my districts. So yes, I advise you to do that, just to get sort of like the answer from them directly.
Jim, did you have anything to add on that in terms of if you were to rock up and whether the marquee was actually outside or not constituted outside?
Oh, Tracy, did you want to come? Oh no, sorry. It's exactly as Tracy's indicated. It would be enforcement, and that would, I think, it would fall to the local environmental health.
Got it.
Service in relation to that, but it's exactly that. If it's not in compliance, then they could expect enforcement activity.
Valerie, if you just want to post into the chat whereabouts you're based, which local authority area you come under, we might be able to tell you someone whom you might be speaking to directly to get further details on that. Okay. Question in from Maisie, no, not on Maisie, where is it? So from Linda, and she actually already posted a question. So this is to do with Tracy and Nathan. This is coming to you both. We've got a batch of questions here. One is from the Musket Brewery. One is from Rodmersham Cricket Club, the Beauty of Bath, and these are all, of course, public houses to relate to waiting on tables. So here are the three questions, and we batched them together, so hopefully we'll cover them all in answers. So will pub gardens, etc., have to provide table service, or can customers collect from an outside bar? And I suspect that's probably quite significant. The other question was from the 12th of April, are we able to sell drinks as long as it is ordered and served outside? And the other question from BT Bath is, do we have to have a table service? So quite clearly to do with the beer garden and how things are operated. So Nathan, do you want to come in first?
Hi. Just legislation says they should be served and consume their food and drink at the table. So that should be ordering, it should be brought to the table, and they should eat and drink at the table. That of course only relates to premises that serve alcohol. The table service requirement isn't there if they're not serving alcohol. But I think in all the ones you specifically mentioned, as you say, these are all public houses will be serving alcohol.
Tracy, you got any thoughts to add to that? Mute. There you go.
Thank you. It was a cunning ploy, wasn't it?
It was.
Just to say, Nathan's right. Customers must remain seated when ordering and while consuming their food and drink. I think it's important to sort of say that you don't have to have food with your drink either. That's a requirement that the government have wisely taken out of this set of legislation. And it's also sort of, the whole purpose is to try and control sort of the spread and transmission of the virus between people while they're consuming food and drink at your businesses. So you have to try and make sure that they don't, you have to take reasonable steps to ensure that customers remain seated. Obviously, sort of that is, it's about reasonableness, I think.
Okay, yeah, no, I think it's interesting you raise that. It's about reasonableness, and I think all of the panel will agree here. We've done this many times before, is that no one is deliberately looking to try and catch you out here. Everyone wants people to be safe and wants you to comply to the best of your abilities. And I think the guiding principle here is, there is guidance, information, do the best you can and with the right intentions. Remember, we're trying to avoid gathering and contact, okay, and the transmission. So just take that into that, apply some common sense and some logic. If you're not sure, of course, you can come back to these others, but I think what will happen, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong here, but if there is an enforcement issue, you're going to be educated before you're going to be prosecuted. So I think, that's the thing, is to make sure that, you take it on board. Jim, is that a fair principle to follow there?
Yeah, I think as the enforcement cell, what we've said across all enforcement, and all enforcement agencies have agreed, is it's obviously that point of, as I said, engage, explain with people, and then only if you need to go to enforcement. But it is that point, if people are trying to do the right thing, then you can help them along that way. If people are deliberately trying to take a different route, then obviously you can get to enforcement quicker than you might otherwise. So yes, everybody's looking there to help people get it right.
Thank you. Positive there. So, okay, try not to get too anxious about some of this. All right. Okay. Question here from Maisie. Maisie's iPhone. It may not be Maisie. We've had this before. Using someone else's iPhone, possibly. Anyway, the question round is in the live chat, and it's, can detailers and mobile valeters, I think we've had this before, open on the 12th of April? Nathan, this is coming your way, I believe. We have all been left out from any information. Detailers and mobile valeters. We've had this in the past. What's your take on that?
Car washes and such have all been removed from the list of restricted businesses from April the 12th, so they can open from April the 12th.
Fabulous, great news. My car is a mess. I'm looking forward to to getting it tied up. I could do it myself, but why would I? It's all about spreading the economy and the love. Right, thank you very much indeed. Let's go back to our question. Thanks. We've got another batch of questions here. This one is for Tracy. Here we go, Tracy. So the two questions here are from the Little Crafty House, which is Danielle, who, I might say, Danielle, you've been peddling away like mad there. brilliant to see you doing exercise and working at the same time. You put us all to shame. Thank you for doing that. Little Crafty House and Walmer Cricket Club. So retail and hospitality sectors here. The questions are from the Little Crafty House. Do you, by law, have to display a QR track and trace? And the other question, which we've matched, is there a need to complete a manual attendance register if the QR code poster system is being used? So, Tracy.
Right, I've taken mute off, so I'm not talking in a peculiar way now. Yes, it's a good question. And there have been some changes to the requirements that the government have put out recently, but there is a need for certain businesses to display a QR code and also to have an alternative tech or smartphone system of recording the name and contact details of customers that come into your services. So we're specifically talking about the hospitality sector. We're talking about close contact services, so barbers, hairdressers, beauticians, leisure, tourism, community centres, village halls. And it's everyone who is over the age of 16 must register. So that's the difference from the previous requirements, which only required the lead officer, the lead person to sort of register their information. So it's everyone who comes needs to sort of log in either through the QR system or through the sort of the manual sort of record. I would also like to say that sort of it's the NHS QR system that needs to be downloaded because it's about setting up a national test and trace process. So I have been to some sort of webinars about this recently, and businesses are required to keep these details, that's the manual details, for 21 days. And they should also keep records of staff working on what shifts, just so that should anybody be positive, and it would be 2 or more people that were positive on the same day at a venue, the venue would be notified. So you'd want to tell your staff to go and get a lateral flow test, but National Test and Trace would pick up the contact with your customers. You don't need to do any of that information or sort of contacting, and the customers don't know who the venue is. That is not released to the people. I hope that sort of is clear, but
absolutely, no, that's great. Thank you very much indeed. Tracy, we just got a questions come back here. So this was about the marquee question, if you remember, and Valerie is saying she's based in Swale, Sittingbourne and Milton Regis Golf Club. So you cover Swale, don't you? Is that right?
Yeah, I do.
So it'll be you. Okay, so there are Valerie. So Tracy's your expert and your contact there for your patch. So feel free to follow up on this later on if you need to. Okay. There was a question here so this is from Joe James. What are the rules with table spacings outside for restaurants and pub gardens? Is it 2 meters spacing again? This is the distance between tables. And there was another question here around do customers need to wear masks as soon as they walk inside the pub, or as they enter the premises when walking around the garden, or do they only need to put them on if they enter the building to pay or use the toilets? So again, when you wear the mask, when you don't wear the mask, spacing of restaurant, and can the members of the public bring their own chair into the beer garden? Why not? If it makes the beer cheaper, why not? Who wants to answer that question? Who's going to take those some compliance then? Tracy, you want to start on that one?
Okay, then it's a bit of a smorgasbord with lots of little bits there. So
yes.
Perhaps Jim and Nathan can pick up if I miss something. The first thing is masks don't have to be worn outside. You only have to wear masks in relevant places, and inside a pub or a restaurant and paying for that food would be a relevant place, I think. And also while they go to the loo, I'd expect sort of customers to wear masks as well. Distances between tables outside, Jim, I'm not certain that I'm aware that there is any sort of minimum or maximum distance. I think it's about sort of sensible spacing. You should have sort of a good circulation of air. You know, if it was a gate in a wall garden, that might be sort of have some influence on it, but I'm not aware of any sort of guidance on spacing of tables outside. And I think that the relevance of bringing your own chair would only be if it's going to be a gathering of more than 6. Would it, Jim?
Jim?
I haven't seen anything either, Tracy, around the distancing, and previously it was 2 meters, or you could reduce to 1 if you had other precautions in place, wasn't it, in the obligations regulations?
Yeah,
I believe.
a screen or something. Yeah.
That was inside, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yes, that.
Yeah,
that was. And in relation to bringing your own chair, correct me if I'm wrong, Tracy, but doesn't the regulation say that it has to be seated?
Yeah.
And it doesn't actually specify a chair, it is seated. So if the pub have no objection, I suppose I would check first, but I can't see anything in law at this point in time that would restrict you from taking your own chair to the pub, apart from obviously don't get carried away and take your sofa. I can't see anything in there at the moment that would stop you from doing that.
That's interesting. Okay, that's great. Thank you both very much. I'm just going to take another question from the live chat. This is from Avelina, who looks after the Bedford pub. So if we do takeaway only, we don't need to ask anyone to check in or to do the QR code or manual form ? We will still display it outside and ask customers to do it. So if we're doing takeaway only, is there a requirement for the QR code and or manual form? Tracy, I guess this is you again.
No, you don't. Takeaways don't need to have a QR code because it's a requirement for hospitality. So it's where you are inviting people onto your premises and they are there for a time. Because it's about the transmission, and the more time you spend in somebody's company and the closer you are, the more likely you are to transmit the virus between people. So it's all about that. That's the essence, the nub of it, I think.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Just while we're talking about systems and logging on, Paul's asked a question here about is there an age restriction as to who should use the system? There is a certain age. I think children don't need to. I understand children don't need to, believe.
Under 16. So
under 16. There's your age limit.
So I think if you've got 2 16-year-olds coming to your premises, then yes, they would. But under 16, no.
Okay, because 2 16s are 32, so that makes sense. Absolutely, brilliant. Okay, there's your batch question, Nathan. These are coming your way now. This is from Mosaic, Graham Taylor Engravers. Nice to see you, Graham. Julian Austin Photography, and Paddockwood Cars. I'm sure that's cars with 1 R, not 2, but easily done. So, and these are all to do with retail. Okay, so I'm going to run through the questions and then see if we can do your best here. Are we maintaining the same COVID rules? Masks, 2 meters, sanitize hands and products. That's the question from Mosaic. Are there any extra safeguards for small micro businesses that have to be in place from last year when we were all allowed to open? I only allow 1 person in at a time, plus I will always wear a mask until not necessary as person at home is high risk. So I guess, has been any changes to what we know to be the same? How many people can I have in my studio at any one time? Are there any special measures to have in place? And I think we had a studio question on the live chat as well. Just checking to see. I'll come back to see if I can find that later on. Yeah, I'll come back to that. And the other one was, what will the restrictions be keeping people apart, i.e. 2 meters or 1 meter, so we can keep people safe in the shop? So I guess this is a shop retail. And again, we were just talking about hospitality where, you could have less than 2 meters as long as there's a mitigating, surface, stuff like that. So quite a few to get your teeth into there, Nathan.
Yeah. Okay. So the mosaic question: maintain the same COVID rules. A lot of the rules are substantially unchanged. However, all the guidance from the government is saying that they are recommending that you increase the ventilation of all of your premises. And now that lateral flow testing is available, they are encouraging you to regularly ensure that all of your staff have lateral flow testing. But all the stuff that we had in place before, like the signage, marking out the floors to prevent people bunching up, providing barriers, hand sanitization, keeping people 2 meters apart, all that is the same. Okay, and we've just tacked on the additional bits and pieces. The Graham Taylor's Engravers Limited question. The legislation and the guidance doesn't scale based on the size and the resources of your business, I'm afraid. So you don't get to relax on the requirements because you haven't got similar resources like a big retailer. So there are no specific relaxations or tightenings based on the size and resources of your business. But if your premise is very, very small, then you would have to take that into account on your risk assessment, because obviously if I can get 100 people in Sainsbury's, but if I try to pack 100 people into a corner shop, it's going to be significantly more risk of transmitting the virus. So your risk assessment would have to take account of the small premises you have, and you would have to identify what was required to keep people safe, which is probably going to be stricter than the requirements you'd have for a larger premises. So you need to have to do your own RA risk assessment, identify what you need to do and follow that risk assessment. And the government have updated the guidance for shops and branches, which I will drop into the chat once I've answered these questions. Next one's Paddock Wood Cards, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
With regards to social distancing, again, the whole face space, etc. That hasn't changed. So we're still working on 2 meter or 1 meter plus, where it is not possible to keep people 2 meter apart. The whole idea of 1 meter plus is the distance comes down to 1 meter where there are other things you put in place to mitigate it. So for example, screens, having all stuff, people side by side, not face to face, that sort of thing. I haven't specifically seen it addressed under phase 2, but obviously with Paddock Wood Cars, there's going to be the issue of test drives. Now, I would imagine that social distancing isn't going to be possible on a test drive. And the advice under phase 1 was because social distancing wasn't possible, test drives should be conducted alone. Now, I haven't seen anything to change that, so I assume that's going to be the case for phase 2 as well, step 2, sorry. And there was one other, wasn't there?
Good question.
Julian Austin Photography.
Julian Austin, that was it. How many people can we have in the studio? Which actually just relates to, I'm just going to add to that now because you're doing so well. Creative studios also seem to be left out of guidance. So again, it's that creative space in studios. And there's a question from Heidi Rogers there about running a gallery straight exhibition space. Is there a limit to the amount of people I can have in that space? We'll have to follow the same guidelines as retail. So whilst you're talking studios, group them all together there.
Well, I'll talk about Julian Austin first. So if Tracy wants to jump in and talk about any of the social distancing aspects, feel free to do so. But I think the number of people that you could get in there safely and what measures you have to place, again, is going to depend on the size of the studio and what your risk assessment, taking into account all the facilities you have, what you can do to keep people safe. Your risk assessment needs to identify what you think is going to be the maximum number that you can have in your studio. You need to manage those numbers so you don't have too many people in there. They're not too bunched up. You have adequate ventilation, etc., that sort of thing. But regardless, I would suggest that you limit anyone in your studio just to what is referred to as a qualified group. So that would be up to 6 people from the same household. Or a larger number from 2 linked households. But all the other bits and pieces would still apply. So the requirement for face coverings, requirement for social distance, provide sanitizer, regularly clean, provide ventilation, have regular testing, all that sort of thing. And then I would invite Jim's comments for like the gallery, because you are walking the line between what is just somebody opening up their place of business and what is an event. And if you're having a showing, you know, for people to come in and look at a new installation or whatever, I think you might be getting into event territory there. So Jim, would you mind giving your opinion on that one?
Thanks, Nathan.
Sorry.
They're laughing because the subject and the regulations around what constitutes an event has become a bit of a thing, really. It's become quite mirror. So, Jim.
It has, yeah. And actually, what I just wanted to say is just to come back on the point about can people take their own chairs to a pub. I'm thinking that a pub actually might have set out their premises with chairs that they've got that meets the requirements that they would have to make sure that people are social distance. So the initial point of I couldn't see a reason why you can't because it's not in legislation, but actually it might impact severely on how the pub is operating. So I don't know that that would actually be applicable, but I can see why people are asking it, because the pub will have a safe working measure to make sure people are social distanced, and I believe you should still not be mingling in the pub. You should be there in your qualifying group, and that's just from the Schedule 2. Right, so art gallery and opening up, is it an event?
Yeah.
If we go back to Regulation 5, so it's a business premises, and a business premises is Regulation 5 basically says if there is an event there, then it is a permitted event. And then you can have people in attendance, and this is where I'm coming back to qualifying groups, because when you then go through Schedule 2, there is a lot of different types of exemptions. So it's not hurrah, we're not on the restricted list, we can open, we can do everything. It's a case of going, you're not on the restricted list, check and see if there are any exemptions that apply to you. So there is nothing specifically mentioned about art galleries. So therefore I would be going to what I've just said around qualifying groups, and in the fact that that should be managed, there should be a flow, so that you're not getting a gathering of lots of people in one place looking at the same piece of art or something like that. So it should be managed. That's where I would be going at the moment. There isn't any specific guidance. We are in communication with central government at the moment, seeking clarification on some of these points, but we're still not there yet. But that's what I would say at the moment is I would say under Regulation 5, the art gallery could, but they would then have to manage people to make sure there was not mixing between the qualifying groups that attended. And if you could stage it, stagger it, so that you haven't got, so you've got a throughput and a flow of people rather than everybody turning up all at one point.
While Jim has been,
response.
Sorry, Jim.
No,
while Jim has been talking, I've taken the opportunity to have another quick squiz through the legislation. It does mention galleries specifically in the legislation, so certain galleries are still restricted at step 2. What it says is museums and galleries, indoor museums and galleries, can't open at step 2, which will be 12th of April, which includes retail galleries where the majority of the art on display is for sale. So I would say that's pretty clear. They can't open it at step 2.
Yep, okay. No, I agree. I agree with you. Yeah. Thank you, Nathan, for picking that up. Yep.
That could be okay. Hopefully that's not too disappointing news, and that you sort of fall the other side of that. Okay, I'm just going to answer some questions because I have got some as well, because I know all about grants and things. So I'm going to quickly canter through mine because we are obviously out of time, but I'm keen to make sure that you get what you need. Remember, if we weren't able to answer your question here today, I'm very sorry. It wasn't through lack of trying, as I'm sure you'll appreciate. You can give us a call 0333 602 300. Asked to get a call back from one of the team, and we'll make sure that happens. Funding. Okay, some quick ones around there. Obviously, there's different types of funding out there at the moment and support. You have the government's COVID response measures, which are things like self-employment income support scheme, like the rates hospitality grant scheme, wet-led pubs, and so forth. You then have the more generic business support grant schemes, which are, I guess, left over from the last time when life was normal, to sort of help you grow your business and other bits and pieces. So there's a bit of a mix here. Quite a few people asking about when will the startup grants. Now, this is the Treasury's announced there'll be a restart grant. Hopefully, the most of you that have rateable properties will be familiar or will have received, hopefully, some of the what were known as varying names. One was the Local Restriction Support Grant, LRSG. One was the Small Business Support Grant, SBS. They are essentially all relating to your business rate, and if you are registered with your local authority, they will automatically be paying into your bank account. The Restart Grant is the money was put into the local authorities' bank accounts round about the 1st of April. So that money is now being processed through. They will be visiting those businesses that they already have registered. So they will automatically qualify. The money will just land in your account. A wonderful surprise. If you haven't applied before or the circumstances have changed, then there will be an access point on the local authority website, and this is at local authority level, isn't a sort of central thing. And each local authority is going through this at their own pace. So in some cases they're up and running in Maidstone, in others they're not. One question here specifically around Tunbridge and Morling. We were told when we were asked the question, they should have theirs by mid-April. They're hoping to have theirs up and live. Okay. And as I say, in terms of it's Tunbridge and Morling, Elsham, okay, that's the same one. There was another one here around, is there any funding available for PPR equipment? As a small business, the cost of PPE equipment is quite high. Will PPE still be required after the 21st of June? Interesting. So there's a couple of questions there. So in terms of will PPE be required? And in fact, Tracy, I'm going to ask you this question, ask that question, but also there was another one around in terms of the pub staff, do the staff need to wear face masks? And at what point will we not need to have PPE? Tracy, do you want to try and answer that?
Well, I think up to June, I think you're definitely going to need your staff to wear face coverings or have alternative systems in place. So you could have screens at the counter. Going forward, I'm afraid it's unknown territory. We just don't know what it's going to be like, really. So don't throw them out. That's all I'd say. Keep them to hand, and we'll see how it goes.
That's fair enough. Thank you. In terms of, is there a grant available? No. Very specifically, there is no grant available to purchase PPE. It is expected that the additional restrictions grant, ARG, which was again one of these business related ones. Now the ARG, the additional restrictions grant, isn't specifically related to business rates. So if you don't pay business rates, so let me get that right. If you're not registered for business rates, because you may not pay them because you might be getting small business rate relief. So if you are not registered for business rates, i.e. you're not in a rateable premises, you would be applying for funding or support funding through the additional restrictions grant, which each local authority has. If you haven't done so, do so, because in some cases they're struggling to get the money out because they've been under applied. And it is with that money that you would be expected to make any purchases required to make your premises COVID safe, because it's a sort of statutory requirement at the moment. So they tend not to give you grants to do that specifically, but they would expect you to use some of those funds for that purposes. Okay. Where was we have to prepare in being COVID safe once restaurants opens. I think that's a funding question. Again, we have trading standards teams. We've already spoken about that, who can help. Is funding available or any assistance for new startups and for those taking on new staff not necessarily trained in our business? So there is a variety. This crosses over a number of different areas. There are, again, a couple of different schemes here. There is the Kickstart Scheme, which you can apply for through the Chamber or direct through DWP, which will provide you with a grant for wages to take on a person who's currently claiming universal credit. That's important, keep that in mind, that's a criteria, and provide a 6-month work placement for them. You are funded to pay their wages and to cover some training costs. You could also then obviously move on to an apprenticeship as well, which again provides some funding for their training and some of the overhead, but you'd still need to pay them national minimum wage at that point. There is also a growth grant called Southeast Business Boost, which is currently available. Criteria is quite tricky, but if you are going to be expanding your business and creating employment, you would be eligible to apply for that, but you would need to put some money in yourself. It's not entirely 100% funded. So some options there. Again, ring the phone number, ask to speak to a business advisor, or get a call back from them. They can go through in a little more detail and understand a bit more about what it is you're trying to do, and can maybe make the appropriate referrals. But there's not grants for everything, obviously, so it's very specific as to what it is you're trying to achieve, as to how best they can help. And again, 033 33 602 300. Okay, give them a call. And they will do their best. Okay, there's 18 messages in the queue in the chat. I'm just very conscious that we are struggling to get through all of this, and there is still some questions left unasked, which were pre-submitted. So I'm going to draw a line under things here, because you can still give us a call and book a call back and hopefully get the question answered. So I do apologize if we've not been able to get through everything. Thank you very much indeed to our panel. Thank you to Tracy, to Steve, to Jim, and to Nathan, and of course Kay and her team for putting all this together. Thank you very much for your patience and understanding and your questions. It is a difficult time out there still. Remember, the principles are no one's looking to get you in trouble. They really want to try and make sure you do the right thing. Bear in mind what we're trying to achieve here. We're trying to stop the spread of this infection, and therefore gatherings and contact stuff. Common sense, logic. If you're not sure, again, give us a call. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, you can pick up this recording on the Trading Standards website, but an email will go out to you when that's ready for collection. But for now, thank you very much indeed for your time and patience. Please do have a very pleasant weekend. Stay safe. Try not to be too anxious. And thank you all very much for joining us. Thank you all.